Close your eyes. Listen to the silence. Now ask yourself, what is more real? The world around you or the thoughts inside your head? Reality feels solid, unshakable, absolute. But if you dare to look closer, you'll find cracks, small fractures, in the foundation of your understanding. Thoughts that don't quite align, moments that slip between your fingers like sand, feelings that whisper something is off. This is where the descent begins. Tonight, you will walk a path that leads nowhere. A path lined with paradoxes, traps designed not to free your mind, but to ensnare it deeper into a labyrinth of doubt. Every step forward will unravel another layer of reality. Each realization will chip away at what you think you know, and by the end, you won't be sure whether you ever truly knew anything at all. But there is no turning back now. You are here. So take a deep breath. Feel the weight of this moment and prepare yourself, because the first paradox is waiting for you. Close your eyes and focus on this moment. Try to capture it, this exact second, right now. But the moment you try, it's already gone. Reality, as you experience it, is always a step ahead of you. You reach for the present, but by the time you grasp it, it has already transformed into the past. What you call now is nothing more than an echo, a delay between what is and what you perceive. This isn't philosophy, it's science. Your brain does not process the world in real time. Every sight, every sound, every sensation reaches you with a delay, milliseconds behind the actual event. Your brain stitches together the illusion of a continuous present. But in truth, you are always lagging behind reality. Imagine watching a live news broadcast on television. You assume you are seeing events as they happen. But in reality, the signal has traveled through networks of wires, satellites, and transmission towers. By the time the image reaches your screen, the event is already in the past. This is exactly how your brain works. The neurons that process vision take time to transmit signals. The nerves that carry sound to your brain introduce delays. Your sense of touch, smell, and balance, all of them work with microscopic lags that add up. The you that you think is experiencing reality in the moment is always a recording, an outdated version of yourself. But if your experience of the present is always in the past, does the present even exist at all? Your brain does something incredible. It stitches together this fragmented, delayed data into what feels like a smooth and continuous reality. It fills in gaps, ignores inconsistencies, and presents to you a manufactured version of the present moment. But the deeper you look, the stranger it gets. Have you ever noticed how, when looking at a ticking clock, the first second seems to last longer than the rest? This is called the stopped clock illusion, a glitch in your brain's attempt to keep up with reality. Your brain lags behind in processing visual input, and to compensate, it creates an artificial moment of stillness, stretching your perception of time. This means your sense of now isn't real. It's an edited, altered construct, a best guess, made by your brain using delayed information. So, if your experience of now is just a delayed reconstruction, where do you actually exist? If you are always experiencing the past, then who is the real you? The one perceiving reality, or the one that is already gone? Think about your reflection in a mirror. It feels like you, but it is always a fraction of a second behind, reacting to movements that have already happened. Your perception of yourself works the same way. By the time you think, I am here, I am now, that moment has already passed. Try something. Snap your fingers. The decision to snap them was made by your brain before you were consciously aware of it. Studies in neuroscience have shown that brain activity begins to signal a decision before a person is aware they have made it. Your brain prepares actions before you think about them, and then your conscious mind creates the illusion that you made the choice in real time. This means your consciousness is always a reaction, a delayed commentary on a reality that has already moved forward. So, if the real you is always ahead of the one who perceives, are you truly in control? You will never catch up to the real present. You will always be behind, chasing a version of reality that has already slipped away. And if the present moment is never truly within reach, then what are you experiencing? A memory, an echo, a hallucination of time that never really was. Here's the real trap. If every moment you have ever lived was already in the past by the time you experienced it, have you ever truly been alive in the present? Or have you only ever lived in a delayed dream, one where the real you was always just out of reach? How do you know this reality is real? Right now, as you listen to these words, as you feel the air around you, as you process these thoughts in your mind, how can you be certain that any of this exists? You might say, because I can see it, hear it, touch it. But what if that's just another illusion? What if everything you perceive is nothing more than an elaborate deception, a carefully constructed mirage designed to keep you from noticing the cracks in existence? Consider your dreams. When you're inside a dream, everything feels real. You experience emotions, physical sensations, and even logic itself as if it were all part of reality. You don't question the absurdity of a dream until you wake up. But what if that's the only difference? Waking up. What if you have never truly woken up? You assume you are awake now, but what makes this moment different from the countless dreams you've had before? The only reason you believe in waking reality is because of continuity. Yesterday followed today, and the day before that followed yesterday. But dreams often carry their own continuity as well. Memories implanted seamlessly into your experience as if they had always been there. What if this reality operates under the same principle? What if all of your memories, your entire past, was only inserted into your consciousness moments ago? How would you ever know? There is a fundamental problem with verifying reality. Any tool you use to test reality is already part of the very system you are trying to verify. If you question your senses, you are using those same senses to validate themselves. If you question your mind, you are using your mind to confirm its own reality. It's a closed system, a loop with no external reference point. If you were trapped inside a perfect simulation, a perfectly crafted illusion, you would never be able to tell. It's like trying to prove that a book is real by reading the pages inside it. No matter what the book says, you are still confined within its narrative. But what if you are inside such a book? What if you are nothing more than a story and reality itself is the fiction? Imagine a highly advanced artificial intelligence, a being created inside a simulation so perfect that it believes itself to be real. It has senses, it has emotions, it has thoughts. If you asked it whether it was real, it would confidently say yes, because all of its experiences confirm that it is. But the truth is, it is merely a program running within a greater system, unable to perceive the boundaries of its existence. How do you know you are not that program? Your world is consistent, yes. It follows rules. The laws of physics remain stable, and time moves forward. But what if that is merely the result of an underlying code, a script designed to make your reality feel stable? A dream follows its own logic, no matter how absurd it may be. The mind creates order where there is none. What if this reality is no different? Have you ever experienced a glitch in your own perception? A moment where time seemed to stretch or collapse, where an object seemed to move on its own, where you misremember something that seems impossible to have forgotten. What if these are not errors in your mind, but errors in the system itself? Small fractures in the illusion, brief moments where reality struggles to maintain itself. The philosopher René Descartes once asked, "What if an evil demon were deceiving me, making me believe in a world that does not exist?" Today, we have an even more terrifying version of that question. What if I am nothing more than a line of code in a simulation? And yet there is no way to answer that. If reality is an illusion, you cannot escape it, because every method of testing it is already inside the illusion. But let's take this further. What happens when you sleep? Where do you go? You close your eyes, and for hours, you cease to exist. Your consciousness vanishes, dissolving into non-existence, only to reappear again when you wake up. But what if each time you wake up, you are a different version of yourself? What if your memories are reconstructed slightly differently every time, making you believe in a past that never happened the way you remember it? If that were the case, how would you ever know? If reality were to reset, if everything you believed about your past were rewritten in this very moment, you would never notice. You would simply continue forward, convinced that this version of reality is the true one, just as you were convinced yesterday and the day before that. But what if I told you that your past never existed, that everything you remember, everything you believe, was only inserted into your consciousness right now? Can you prove otherwise? Look around you, touch something solid, feel the weight of it. Let your mind reassure you that the world is real. But remember, any proof you find, any certainty you hold on to, is already part of the very reality you are questioning. You will never find an answer outside of it because there is no outside. Which leads to the final, most disturbing question of all. If you can never truly verify reality, then does reality even exist? Or are you simply trapped inside a story? One that convinces you it is real because it has no other choice. Close your eyes and try to recall your first memory. Not just any early memory, but the very first moment you became aware of yourself. Maybe it was a childhood scene, a familiar face, a sensation of warmth or fear. Maybe it's just a vague blur, something your mind struggles to reach. But now, ask yourself, how do you know it really happened? How do you know that memory wasn't just a story your brain invented, a fabrication carefully constructed to make you believe in a past that never existed? Your memories define you. They are the foundation of your identity, the proof that you have lived, that you have existed across time. Without them, you would be a stranger to yourself, an empty vessel without a past. But what if those memories were never real? What if every time you recall a moment from your past, you are not retrieving a stored file, but instead rewriting the story, changing details, adding elements, erasing others? Memory is not a perfect recording. It is a reconstruction, a fragile illusion constantly being edited by your brain. Every time you remember an event, you alter it. Studies in neuroscience have shown that memories shift over time, blending with new experiences, becoming more distorted with each recollection. In essence, every time you revisit a memory, you unknowingly rewrite it, making it less accurate than before. So here's the question. If your past is constantly changing, then who are you? Think about a childhood story you've told countless times. The version you tell today is likely not the same as the one you told years ago. Maybe small details have changed, the color of a room, the people involved, the sequence of events. But if the story is different now, was it ever true to begin with? And if your memories are in a constant state of flux, can you ever be certain of who you really are? Imagine waking up tomorrow with an entirely different set of memories, ones that feel just as real, just as vivid as the ones you have now. Your name, your childhood, your experiences, all rewritten, yet with no indication that anything has changed. You would go about your day believing you were the same person you were yesterday, unaware that your past had been altered. But what if that has already happened? What if it happens every time you sleep, and each morning you wake up as someone slightly different, holding on to memories that were implanted just moments before? There are cases of people suffering from sudden memory loss, amnesia that erases their sense of self completely. They wake up as blank slates, with no recollection of their own existence. They are alive, they are conscious, but they have no identity. Now think about this. If memories define who we are, and a person can continue to exist without them, then what are we really? Are we just an accumulation of recalled experiences? And if those experiences can vanish, does the self vanish with them? Even worse, what if false memories have already been implanted in your mind? You wouldn't be able to tell the difference. You would recall events that never happened, relationships that never existed, emotions that were never felt. You would defend them, swear by them, insist that they were real, because your brain has already accepted them as truth. But if you can believe in a false past, then what does that say about the truth of the past you currently hold? Your identity is based on an ever-changing, unreliable archive of moments that may or may not have occurred the way you remember. But if the past can be rewritten in your own mind, then what is real? Think about the moments in your life that shaped you. The memories that define your sense of self. The lessons you've learned. The pains you've endured. The joys you've experienced. If those moments had played out differently, would you still be the same person? Would you still be you, or would you be someone entirely different? If the answer is yes, if a change in memories means a change in identity, then here's the terrifying thought. What if the you that exists right now is not the same you that existed yesterday? What if every night, as you sleep, your memories shift just slightly, adjusting and rearranging without your knowledge? What if the person you were yesterday is already gone, replaced by a new version, one that holds onto memories that may or may not be real? If you are only the sum of your memories, but those memories are constantly changing, then who or what are you? Perhaps you are nothing more than a story your mind is telling itself, one that it rewrites every time you try to remember. But if that's true, what happens when the story ends? Think about the last decision you made. Maybe it was something simple, choosing what to eat, picking a direction to walk, deciding to listen to this very script. You probably felt like you made a conscious choice, that you weighed your options, and then, in a single moment, you chose. But what if I told you that wasn't the case? What if your brain had already made the decision before you were even aware of it? This isn't speculation, it's science. Studies in neuroscience have revealed something unsettling. The brain begins to prepare for an action before a person consciously decides to do it. In one experiment, researchers monitored brain activity while subjects were asked to press a button at a moment of their choosing. What they found was disturbing. The brain activity that initiated the movement began several seconds before the subjects were even aware they had made a decision. Their consciousness was late to the party, playing catch-up with a decision that had already been made. Think about what this means. You don't make choices in real time. Your brain does. Your conscious mind, the part of you that thinks, reflects, and believes it is in control, is not the origin of your actions. It is merely observing them, post-rationalizing them, coming up with explanations after the fact. Now, ask yourself, if every decision has already been made before you even think about making it, then what does that say about free will? Imagine watching a movie where the ending is already written, but the characters on screen believe they are making their own choices. They struggle, they hesitate, they contemplate different paths, but in reality, every action they take has already been determined by the script. The illusion of choice is there, but it is only that, an illusion. What if you are just like those characters? If your brain decides before you do, then are you truly making choices? Or are you merely playing out a predetermined sequence of events? You might argue that you still experience the sensation of choosing, that even if decisions originate in the subconscious, you still feel like you are in control. But feelings are not reality. Just because you feel like you are making a choice does not mean that you are. Just because the illusion is convincing does not mean it is true. Now let's take this even further. If your decisions are dictated by subconscious processes beyond your control, then what causes those subconscious processes? The neurons in your brain fire based on prior experiences, biological programming, and environmental influences. That means every choice you make is based on things that happened before the moment of decision. Which means every choice is not actually a choice at all. It is an effect of something that came before. And that brings us to the final, most unsettling realization. If every decision is caused by something prior, then what was the first decision? If every choice is the result of a previous state, a chain of causes stretching backward through time, then where did the first cause originate? Was there ever a point where a choice was truly free, uncaused by anything else? Or has everything, every decision, every thought, every action, been an inevitability from the very beginning? You did not choose to be born. You did not choose your genetics, your upbringing, or the billions of tiny influences that shaped your mind. And yet, these things define your decisions. They form the foundation of every so-called choice you have ever made. So here is the question that should haunt you. If every action you take is the result of a prior cause, and if those causes were outside your control, then have you ever truly made a decision at all? Or have you simply been watching your life unfold, mistaking inevitability for agency? And if you have never truly made a choice, then who or what is really in control? Close your eyes and try to remember the last dream you had. Not just the details, but the feeling of it, the texture of its reality, the way it seemed completely normal at the time. For those brief moments inside the dream, you didn't question it. You lived in it. You accepted it as real. Then suddenly, you woke up. And within seconds, the dream began to disintegrate. The logic unraveled, the images blurred, the sensations faded. In minutes, it was gone, erased as if it had never existed at all. But here's the terrifying question. How do you know that hasn't happened before? What if every time you wake up, you are not just emerging from a dream, but waking into a new reality, one that has replaced another, one that has wiped away an entire existence that you can no longer remember? Dreams are unstable. They dissolve under the weight of consciousness, vanishing as if they were never real. But in the moment, they feel just as real as waking life. What if this reality works the same way? Have you ever had a moment of déjà vu, an eerie sensation that you've been here before, that you've lived this exact sequence of events? What if déjà vu is not just a glitch in memory, but a fragment of a past reality leaking through? A moment from a forgotten existence? A life that was erased when you woke up into this one? And if that is true, how many times has this happened before? Imagine that each time you close your eyes, you are not merely sleeping, but exiting one reality and entering another. Each night, the past is erased, rewritten, rearranged. Each morning, you wake with a false continuity, believing in a history that may not have existed yesterday. What if every time you drift into unconsciousness, you lose something, some memory, some truth, some awareness of what came before? The idea of past lives is often spoken about in mystical terms, but what if they are not separated by death, but by sleep? What if the reason you don't remember them is not because they are distant, but because you have forgotten them just as easily as you forget a dream? Think about the moments just before waking, the surreal in-between state where reality and dreams blend together. There is a fleeting sense of another world, another self, another experience. But as soon as your eyes open, it collapses, disappearing, as though it never was. What if the same thing happens when you transition between realities? What if you have woken up thousands of times before, each time stepping into a new version of yourself, with no recollection of the one that came before? You believe you have always been you. You believe your past has always been the same. But you only believe that because that is what you remember. Now consider this. If every past version of you has been erased when you woke up, how would you ever know? Maybe the person you were yesterday, last week, last year, maybe they are gone. Maybe that version of you woke up one morning with a past that was never theirs, believing in memories that were never real. And if that is true, then who are you really? What if you are only ever the latest dreamer, the latest sleeper, the latest version of a person who has already been replaced? What if, when you sleep tonight, you will never wake up? Not truly. What if someone else, someone with your memories, your personality, your voice, opens their eyes in the morning, believing they have always been you, never realizing that the original version of you is gone? And if that is the case, how do you know it hasn't already happened? How do you know it didn't happen last night? How do you know it doesn't happen every single night? And if every version of you before today has been erased, then did they ever truly exist at all? Or are you nothing more than a temporary dream, waiting to be forgotten? Who are you? You might answer with your name, your memories, your personality. You might define yourself by your experiences, the choices you've made, the relationships you've built. But now, let's strip all of that away, piece by piece. Your name. Did you choose it? No, it was given to you. You could have been named anything. Your memories. Are they reliable? We already know that memory is fragile, prone to distortion and reconstruction every time you recall it. Your past, the very thing that defines your sense of self, is nothing more than a story being rewritten each time you remember it. Your personality, do you own it? Or was it shaped by forces beyond your control? Genetics, environment, upbringing, random chance. If you had been born in another time, another place, another set of circumstances, you would not be the same person you are now. So, is there really a you beneath it all? Or are you simply the result of billions of small influences, all stacked together to create the illusion of identity? Now let's go deeper. Think about your body. Every 7 years, every single cell in your body is replaced. The skin, the bones, the neurons in your brain, everything is gradually renewed, molecule by molecule. The person you were 7 years ago had a completely different physical form. If identity is tied to the body, then where is the original version of you? Did that person die? If not, then what makes you you? What if you could replace your body instantaneously, What if we could swap out every cell one by one with identical replacements? Would you still be you? If we took your brain and replicated it, neuron by neuron, could the copy claim to be you as well? And if both versions of you exist at the same time, which one is the real you? The Ship of Theseus is a thought experiment that asks, if you replace every single part of a ship over time, is it still the same ship? But now, let's turn that question inward. If every part of you is replaceable, if your thoughts are constantly shifting, if your memories are mutable, then what is the real version of you? Is there even such a thing? Or are you nothing more than a collection of fleeting thoughts and temporary forms, a structure without permanence? And if there is no unchanging, stable version of you, no fixed point that remains the same across time, then what does that mean? It means that the you that woke up this morning is not the same you that existed yesterday. It means that the person who started listening to this script is not the same person listening to these words right now. So where does identity begin? Where does it end? And if you are always dissolving, always shifting, always becoming something else, then were you ever truly here at all? Imagine a book that erases itself as you read it. The words on the page vanish the moment your eyes move past them, leaving behind only blank paper. By the time you reach the final sentence, the beginning has already disappeared. You turn back, but there is nothing left. Only the present moment, fleeting and temporary, with no trace of the past. Now, consider this. What if the universe functions the same way? You assume that the past is real because you remember it. But what if the past is not a fixed existing thing? What if, like the vanishing words in the book, it ceases to exist the moment you move forward in time? Right now, you believe in yesterday. You recall events, experiences, moments that seem to have shaped you. But memory is not the past. Memory is just electrical activity in your brain. Fragile, unreliable, subject to distortion. Your brain tells you that yesterday existed, but where is yesterday? Can you touch it? Can you return to it? Can you prove it still exists? The same is true for the future. It does not exist yet, except in your imagination. It is a concept, a mental projection, a set of possibilities that have not yet been realized. That leaves only the present. But as we've already established, you never truly experience the present in real time. Your perception is always delayed, always lagging behind reality. So if the past no longer exists, and the future has not yet arrived, and the present is nothing more than a reconstructed illusion, then what is left? Nothing. You might argue that the universe still exists as a physical reality, that the atoms and forces around you persist, whether you observe them or not. But quantum mechanics suggests otherwise. Particles exist in multiple states at once until they are observed, until consciousness interacts with them. If the universe requires observation to define itself, then what happens when there is no one left to observe it? Does it collapse? Does it vanish? Like the words on the disappearing page. Imagine a computer that continuously deletes old files to make room for new ones. The system runs efficiently, keeping only the present process active while erasing all previous data. What if the universe is built the same way? What if reality only exists in the moment it is being processed, and everything before it is erased? You assume the world remains stable, that history has been recorded, that the past is permanent. But imagine waking up tomorrow to a universe that has no memory of yesterday, no history, no records, no evidence that anything came before. Would you notice? Would you feel the loss? Or would reality seamlessly overwrite itself, presenting a new version of history as if it had always been there. If the universe deletes itself, rewriting the past with every passing moment, then what does that say about time, about existence, about you? Perhaps reality is nothing more than a self-correcting loop, a system that erases itself as it moves forward. And if that is the case, then the version of you that existed a moment ago is already gone, deleted, forgotten, replaced by the you that exists now, who will also be erased in the next moment. Which leaves one final, unsettling question. If everything you have ever been is already gone, then did you ever truly exist at all? Close your eyes and try to define reality, not just in vague terms, but in absolute certainty. What is real? What can you point to and say with complete confidence that it truly exists? Your body, your thoughts, the world around you? Now ask yourself, how do you know? You trust your senses, but they can be deceived. You trust your memories, but they can be altered. You trust your logic, but logic itself is based on assumptions. Every belief you hold about reality is built upon a foundation of something else, something deeper, something that you take for granted without question. But what happens when you start questioning? Imagine waking up in a dream. At first, you believe it's real. You experience sights, sounds, emotions. But then, something feels off. Maybe the world behaves strangely, or maybe you just know that something isn't right. Then it hits you. You're dreaming. The moment you realize this, the illusion starts to collapse. The dream bends, distorts, and suddenly, you wake up. Relief washes over you. You're back in reality. Everything feels normal again. But then, you notice something strange. A detail that shouldn't be there. A sensation that lingers just a little too long. And suddenly, the realization returns. You are still dreaming. You wake up again, and again, and again. Each time you believe you've reached reality, only to discover it is yet another layer of the illusion. But what if this never stops? What if every time you think you've awakened, you have only entered another level of the loop? What if there is no final reality? You assume that if you are experiencing something, it must be real. But what if reality itself is nothing more than a stack of simulations layered infinitely, with no way to know which level is the last? What if waking up is just shifting from one layer to the next, and you have never truly reached the end? Think about the nature of perception. Everything you know about the world comes from signals processed by your brain. Light enters your eyes, sound enters your ears, and electrical impulses translate them into what you call reality. But what if this entire process is taking place inside a greater system? What if your mind is simply experiencing an interface, a carefully constructed illusion designed to keep you from realizing the truth? If this is a simulation, what created it? Another reality above it? And what created that? If reality is built upon layers, then where does it stop? You might believe that eventually you would find the real world, the base reality. But what if there is no base reality? What if every layer is just another simulation inside a greater one, an infinite recursion of artificial worlds, each believing itself to be the final truth? And if there is no base reality, if every level is just another dream inside a dream, then what does that mean for you? Are you real? Or are you just another layer in the loop? And if you are trapped inside a cycle with no end, then how do you know you haven't already woken up 1,000 times before, only to forget each time? How do you know that this isn't happening right now? What if, in a moment, you will wake up again, only to realize that none of this was ever real? What if you never truly wake up, What if you can't? Look around you. Observe the world, the objects, the space you occupy. Everything seems stable, external, independent of your thoughts. You assume that the world exists first, and you are simply an observer, moving through it, processing it from within your own mind. But what if that assumption is completely wrong? What if reality isn't something you experience, but something that is experiencing you? Think about this. Every sight, sound, and sensation you perceive exists only inside your brain. You have never directly interacted with the world, only with the signals your senses send you. The chair you sit on, the air you breathe, even your own body. These things only exist for you in the form of neural impulses. You don't see light. You experience the electrical interpretation of it. You don't hear sound. You experience vibrations converted into meaning inside your mind. So where exactly is reality? You assume that the world is outside of you, but what if it is actually contained within you? Imagine for a moment that you are not a person looking out at the world, but instead you are the world looking in at itself. The colors, the objects, the movement, the space. You assume they are external, but they only exist within your perception. And since perception is all you ever truly know, how can you be certain there is anything beyond it? Maybe the reason you feel like a separate entity moving through reality is because that is how your mind was designed to interpret itself. But what if the boundary between you and everything else is just an illusion? Close your eyes. Feel your breath. Right now, where does your mind end and the rest of the world begin? Can you actually pinpoint that division? Or is your sense of self just another perception? One more experience among countless others? The unsettling truth is this. You have no way to confirm whether you are inside the universe or if the universe is inside you. Your experience of everything, space, time, matter, is completely dependent on your perception. And if perception is the filter through which all reality is constructed, then reality itself is not something external at all. It is something created by your mind. But if that's the case, what happens when you stop perceiving? What happens to the world when you sleep? When you lose consciousness? When you cease to exist? If reality is dependent on you experiencing it, then the moment you disappear, does the universe disappear as well? And if that is true, then here is the final, disturbing question. Are you simply a mind inside a universe? Or are you the only thing that has ever existed, endlessly constructing and reconstructing a reality that is nothing more than your own infinite reflection? You have spent your entire life inside your own mind. Every thought you have ever had, every experience, every moment of joy, pain or confusion, all of it has been processed through the filter of your own consciousness. You can never step outside of yourself. You can never know what it is like to be someone else. This leads to a disturbing question. How do you know that anyone else actually exists? This is the foundation of solipsism, the unsettling idea that only your own mind is real, and that everything else is either an illusion or a construct of your perception. If the only thing you have ever directly experienced is your own consciousness, then what proof do you have that anything beyond it is real? But what if we invert this perspective? What if, instead of doubting the existence of others, you should doubt your own? Think about this. The world does not depend on you. The sun will rise whether you wake up to see it or not. Conversations will continue in rooms you are not present in. Billions of lives unfold, unaffected by your awareness. The universe has existed for billions of years before you were born, and it will continue long after you are gone. Now consider the possibility that you are the illusion. What if you are not the observer of reality, but the observed? What if you are not the central consciousness experiencing the world, but instead just one of many fragments, one tiny ripple in an ocean of awareness that has existed long before you and will continue without you? You assume you are real because you feel real. But imagine for a moment that your entire identity is nothing more than a fleeting thought in someone else's mind. What if your memories, your sense of self, your entire existence, what if it is not truly yours at all? What if you are not the dreamer but the dream? Imagine that somewhere, beyond the limits of your comprehension, there is a larger mind, a greater consciousness that is experiencing itself in infinite forms. And you are just one of those forms, one moment of awareness, one temporary flicker of thought, destined to fade as quickly as it appeared. And if that is true, then who or what is truly real? If you are merely a passing moment in a vast, endless awareness, then what happens when that awareness moves on? Does the world continue without you, or does your world disappear because you were never really here to begin with? Close your eyes and think about yourself thinking. Observe the way your mind processes this thought. Notice how the moment you try to focus on your own awareness, it shifts, like a shadow that retreats when you reach for it. Now, go deeper. Who is doing the thinking? Who is observing the thought? Is there a single you inside your mind? Or are you simply layers upon layers of awareness, endlessly looping back on themselves? Try this. Imagine that you are standing in front of a mirror, holding another mirror. The reflections stretch infinitely in both directions, each version of yourself watching another, all contained within one another. But which reflection is the real you? Now apply this to your mind. If you can observe yourself thinking, then what part of you is doing the observing? Is there a deeper consciousness behind your thoughts, watching them unfold? And if there is, can that consciousness observe itself? The moment you attempt to catch your own awareness in the act, it shifts, it retreats. You are never able to fully perceive yourself perceiving. You are always one step removed, always watching from just outside the edge of understanding. This is the recursive mind problem, the idea that your consciousness is trapped in an infinite feedback loop, endlessly reflecting upon itself, never able to reach a true center. Imagine for a moment that your mind is simply a hall of mirrors, each thought reflecting another, each awareness giving birth to the next. If that is the case, then what is? At the core, is there a single stable version of you at the center of all these reflections? Or are you just a collection of echoes, bouncing forever in an empty chamber of thought? You assume there is a thinker behind your thoughts. But if every thought comes from another thought before it, then where did the first thought originate? And if there was never a first thought, if every thought is simply another recursion of awareness, then who or what is actually thinking? Maybe there is no thinker at all. Maybe consciousness is not a thing, but a process, an endless recursion with no beginning and no end. Maybe the you that you believe yourself to be is nothing more than the illusion created by this loop. And if that is true, then who is listening to this right now? Who is thinking the thoughts you are having at this very moment? Who or what is truly aware? Imagine waking up in a room with no doors, no windows, and no way out. The walls stretch endlessly in every direction, yet you can never reach them. You are trapped in a space that has no exit. At first, you panic. You search for a way out, convinced that there must be some escape. But as time passes, a terrifying realization sets in. There is no exit, because there was never supposed to be one. Now, ask yourself, What if reality is exactly like this? What if existence itself is a closed system? A place where you are conscious, but can never truly leave. You have never been outside of reality. You have never stepped beyond existence. You assume there is something outside of what you know, but is there? Or are you simply trapped inside a space that has no doors, no windows, and no possibility of escape? Try to imagine what it would be like to step outside of existence. What would that even mean? You can think of death as an escape, but is it? Can you experience non-existence? Can you even conceive of a state in which you do not exist? When you try, you find that your mind cannot do it. The very act of imagining non-existence confirms your existence. You cannot step outside of the system because your mind is the system. But let's take it even further. If there is no way to leave existence, then was there ever a way to enter it? Did you ever truly begin? You assume you were born, that you came into awareness at some point. But what if that is just another illusion? What if your consciousness is trapped in a cycle with no beginning and no end? Think about it. You cannot remember the moment you became conscious. You may remember early childhood, but there is no clear, definable moment where awareness began. You were simply here one day, thinking, existing, experiencing. What if you have always been here? What if existence is not something you entered, but something you have always been trapped inside? You might argue that one day you will die, that death is the ultimate exit. But how do you know? Have you ever died? Have you ever experienced the absence of awareness? Or does awareness simply continue endlessly, shifting forms, moving from one state to another, never truly escaping? Imagine an insect trapped in a glass jar. It crawls up the sides, searching for an opening, but the lid is sealed. It does not understand why it cannot escape, only that it is confined. It does not question the nature of the jar, it simply exists within it, unaware that there is no way out. What if you are that insect? What if your entire existence, your mind, your sense of self, your reality, is just a jar you can never leave? You assume there is something beyond this life, but you have never been outside of it. You assume that when you die, there is something else, but that is only a theory, one you cannot prove. What if there is nothing else? What if reality is all there is, and you are trapped within it forever? And if that is the case, then you were never meant to escape. You were never meant to leave. You were only meant to exist, endlessly, with no exit and no way to stop. So, here's the final question. If there is no way out, then what happens next? If you are trapped inside existence with no escape, then does that mean you have already lived this before? Will you live it again, or worse? Are you already living it again, right now, unable to remember the last time? Close your eyes and try to picture the farthest reaches of the universe, the vast, endless void stretching beyond the stars. Galaxies spinning in the darkness, worlds forming and dying in an incomprehensible expanse of time. Now, imagine something even stranger. What if none of it ever existed? You assume the universe has always been here. That history stretches backward into eternity. That time has always moved forward. That reality itself is permanent. But what if reality is only real because someone remembers it? What if existence itself is not a constant, but something that must be remembered in order to exist at all? Think about a book. It holds a story, a world, a collection of thoughts. But if no one ever reads that book, does the story truly exist? The ink is there, the pages remain, but the story itself, the experience of it, only comes alive when it is perceived. What if the universe operates the same way? Right now, you remember yesterday. You assume the past is real because you can recall events, people, moments. But your memory is not the past itself. Your memory is just electrical signals firing in your brain. If those signals were erased, would the past still exist? If every person vanished, if every memory was erased, would the universe still hold its history? Or would it dissolve like a book that was never read? Consider what happens when you forget something, an event, a name, a detail. As far as your mind is concerned, that thing no longer exists. If no one remembers it, it may as well have never happened. Now, apply that to the entire universe. What happens to reality if one day no one is left to remember it? You assume that even if humans disappear, the universe will continue. The stars will burn, the planets will orbit, the galaxies will drift in space. But how do you know? Have you ever seen a reality without an observer? Has anything ever existed for you outside of perception? The universe is only real because you experience it. Every color, every texture, every object exists only as data in your mind. Without an observer, does any of it exist at all? Imagine that one day, far in the future, the last conscious being in the universe ceases to exist. There are no more thoughts, no more memories, no more awareness. Without an observer, the universe becomes nothing, because nothing perceives it. There is no one left to remember the stars, the planets, the history of everything that ever was. Achieve that moment. Does the universe still exist? Or does it vanish because it has been forgotten? Now take it one step further. What if this has already happened? What if the universe did exist long ago, but was eventually forgotten? What if all of history, the billions of years, the civilizations, the minds that once thought and dreamed was erased, and now we exist in a new version of reality, one that replaced the last? What if we are already living in a universe that has reset, a blank slate that has no memory of the realities that came before? You assume that the past is real, that history is permanent. But what if that is an illusion? What if history has already been rewritten countless times, and we are simply the latest version of a forgotten world? If that is true, then here is the final, most unsettling question. If this universe will one day be forgotten too, if everything you know, everything you are, will one day vanish without a trace, then did any of it ever truly exist? Or has everything, all along, been nothing more than a dream that no one will ever remember? Close your eyes and listen to the voice in your head, the one that reads these words, the one that narrates your thoughts, the one that feels like you. But now, focus deeper. Who is listening? Who is aware of that voice? You assume that you are a single consciousness, a unified self, moving through reality with one continuous stream of thought. But if you can observe your own thinking, then what part of you is doing the observing? Think about the moments when you talk to yourself, when your thoughts split into arguments, when one part of you tries to convince another. If you were truly a single, unified consciousness, how could there be two perspectives inside your own mind? Now take it further. Imagine standing in front of a mirror. You see your reflection, but you know it isn't you. It's just an image, a projection of yourself in space. But what if your thoughts work the same way? What if the voice in your head is not the real you, but only a reflection of awareness, something generated by a deeper mind that you can never fully grasp? Your consciousness is not a stable entity. It is constantly shifting, observing itself, reacting to itself. The moment you try to pin it down, it moves. The moment you focus on one layer of thought, another layer emerges beneath it. This is the trap. You assume that there is a core you, a thinker behind the thoughts, a stable awareness beneath the surface. But the more you search for it, the more it retreats. It is like a hall of mirrors, reflections bouncing infinitely with no original source. If your mind can observe itself thinking, then which part of you is the real observer? And if you can never reach the final observer, if every layer of consciousness is just another illusion, then does a real you even exist? Now imagine something even stranger. What if your consciousness is not one, but many? Scientists studying split-brain patients, people whose left and right hemispheres have been surgically disconnected, have discovered something unsettling. Each hemisphere seems to operate independently, almost as if there are two separate minds inside one skull. When asked questions, one hemisphere might respond with words, while the other responds with actions. One might deny knowing something, while the other reveals the truth. What if the same thing is happening inside your mind? What if you are not one consciousness, but a fragmented collection of perspectives, working together so seamlessly that you mistake them for a single self? You assume that the thoughts in your head belong to you. But if consciousness can be divided, if the mind is capable of splitting into multiple perspectives, then what if you are just one piece of something larger? And if that's the case, then who or what is the real you? Maybe there is no true self. Maybe there is no singular awareness. Maybe the you that you believe yourself to be is nothing more than a temporary collection of thoughts, a flickering illusion that holds itself together just long enough to create the appearance of a unified mind. But if your identity is just a trick of perception, if there is no final, singular version of you, then what happens when the illusion falls apart? What happens when the voices in your mind stop agreeing? What happens when you realize that you were never just one consciousness, but a fractured, shifting system of thoughts, endlessly chasing itself in circles? And if that's true, then here's the real question. If you are not one self, but many, then which one of you is really in control? And which one of you is listening to this right now? Try to pinpoint the exact moment that now begins. Not a second ago, not a moment later, this precise, singular instant. But by the time you focus on it, it's already gone. You assume time moves in a smooth, unbroken flow, that the present is always here, always unfolding, moment by moment. But if you try to isolate a single instant, you find that it slips away, just out of reach. Where is now? You might say that the present moment is what you're experiencing right now, but your brain does not process reality in real time. Neuroscientists have discovered that perception is always delayed, a fraction of a second behind actual events. By the time you become aware of something, it has already happened. If the present is always just slightly behind you, then have you ever actually experienced it? Or have you only ever lived in a delayed version of reality? Now think about the space between moments. If time is a continuous stream, then it should be possible to isolate a single instant, to take one frozen frame of existence. But here's the paradox. If time is divided into distinct points, then there must be gaps between those points. What happens in those gaps? Imagine a movie reel. A film appears to show movement, but in reality, it is made up of still frames, flickering in rapid succession. The illusion of motion is created by the gaps between those frames. What if reality works the same way? What if your experience of time is not a continuous flow, but a rapid sequence of frozen moments, strung together like the frames of a film? What if between each moment, between each flicker of awareness, there is nothing. If there are missing moments in time, then where do you go during those gaps? Now take this even further. Imagine that time is not just divided into small slices, but infinitely divisible. No matter how much you zoom in, there will always be another fraction of a moment beneath it, another layer of time splitting apart, endlessly. If that's the case, then can time ever truly move forward? Or is it simply an infinite series of missing moments, gaps that stretch into eternity, giving the illusion of motion where there is none? And if time is just an illusion created by the way your mind processes events, then what does that mean for the past? What if the past never truly happened? What if every moment you remember is just a reconstruction, a series of flickering thoughts, filling in the blanks where something is missing? You assume that you have been alive for years, that you have moved through time continuously. But what if your entire life has not been a seamless flow, but a collection of fragmented instances? What if the person you were a second ago is already gone, erased in the missing moment before the next instant began? And if you can never find the present, if every now vanishes before you can catch it, then are you even truly here at all? Close your eyes for a moment. Feel the space around you, the weight of your body, the sensation of your breath. Now, ask yourself, what happens to the world when you stop perceiving it? You assume that reality remains unchanged whether or not you are looking. That when you close your eyes, the objects around you persist, unaltered, waiting for you to return. But how do you know? You have never experienced a reality outside of your perception. Everything you know exists only within your mind. Colors, sounds, sensations, even the concept of time itself. Your entire world is constructed by your brain, based on the signals it receives. But if perception is what creates your experience of reality, then what happens when perception stops? Consider the simple act of blinking. For a fraction of a second, your visual field disappears, but your mind does something strange. It fills in the gap. You do not notice the absence because your brain smooths over the missing moment, creating the illusion of uninterrupted reality. Now take this further. If your brain can erase and replace moments of perception without you noticing, then how do you know that reality exists in the moments when you are not aware of it? Imagine walking into a room and seeing a chair. You assume that the chair existed before you arrived, that it has been sitting there all along. But the only evidence you have of the chair's existence is your current perception of it. When you leave the room, when you stop looking, what proof do you have that the chair still exists? You might argue that other people can see it, that the world continues without you, but you do not experience their perception. You only experience your own. Their awareness exists only as an idea within your mind, and that idea itself is part of your perception. This is the vanishing perception trap, the realization that you can never verify the existence of anything beyond the moments in which you are actively perceiving it. Now consider something even stranger. Have you ever been lost in thought, so completely absorbed in your own mind that you forget your surroundings? For a few moments, the outside world ceases to exist. Then, you snap back, and reality feels like it returns. But where was it before? What if, in those moments of deep thought or unconsciousness, the world simply isn't there? What if reality does not persist on its own, but only comes into existence the moment you turn your attention to it? Imagine waking up in the morning. You assume that the world existed while you slept, but for you, subjectively, it did not. There was no passage of time, no space, no reality, only nothingness. Then, suddenly, you regain awareness, and reality loads around you as if it had just begun. What if this is not just how sleep works, but how reality itself functions. What if, every time you lose perception, even for a moment, the universe vanishes, and when you return, it reboots into existence? If that is true, then here is the final, unsettling question. What happens when perception vanishes completely? If reality exists only when it is perceived, then when the last observer disappears, when the final conscious mind fades into nothingness, does the universe simply cease to be? And if that is the case, then what happens when you are gone? Does the world continue without you? Or does everything vanish with you, as if it had never been there at all? You believe that reality follows rules, that logic, cause and effect, and the laws of physics govern existence in a stable and predictable way. But what if that assumption is wrong? What if reality is not a fixed system, but something far stranger, something capable of contradicting itself? Think about a paradox, a statement that contradicts itself, but still somehow seems to make sense. This sentence is false. If it is true, then it must be false. But if it is false, then it must be true. A loop with no resolution. Now, apply this to reality itself. Quantum physics tells us that particles can exist in multiple states at once until they are observed. Schrödinger's cat is both alive and dead in its box until someone looks. A photon can travel through two slits simultaneously. The very fabric of the universe seems to allow contradictions to exist, not just as theoretical possibilities, but as fundamental truths. If reality can contradict itself at the quantum level, then what is stopping it from doing the same at the level of your experience? Imagine this. You wake up in the morning feeling rested. You look at the clock, 7 a.m. Everything seems normal, but then you look again and it says 3 Yao a.m. You blink and it's back to 7 Kao. You feel the memory of seeing both times, but which one was real? This is the contradictory nature of perception. The mind fills in gaps, smooths over inconsistencies, and creates an illusion of continuity where there may be none. You assume that time moves forward, that objects remain stable, that reality follows a set of logical rules. But what if that is simply a filter your brain applies, and not an actual property of the universe? Think about the way you process the world. When you see an object, your brain does not receive all the information at once. Instead, it constructs a mental model based on past experiences, expectations, and incomplete sensory data. You don't actually see reality as it is. You see a version of reality that your brain assumes is there. But what if those assumptions sometimes contradict each other? What if, for a brief moment, two realities exist simultaneously? One where something happened, and one where it didn't. Have you ever had a moment where you know something happened, but then later, all evidence of it is gone? A word you were sure was in a book, a memory you were certain was real, a detail that seems to have been erased from reality itself. What if these are not failures of memory, but glimpses into the contradictory nature of existence? You assume that contradictions cannot exist in reality, that something either is or it isn't, that two things cannot be true at the same time. But if quantum mechanics allows contradictions at the smallest level, then why wouldn't they also exist at the level of your consciousness? Now take this idea further. If contradictions can exist, then what happens when two completely opposing realities overlap? What if you were both alive and dead, both here and not here, both real and unreal? You might think that's impossible, that such a thing cannot happen. But quantum physics suggests otherwise. If particles can be in superposition, existing in multiple states at once, then why not consciousness itself? And if your perception of reality is built upon contradictory signals, glitches in the system that your brain corrects without you noticing, then how can you ever be sure that what you are experiencing is the reality and not just one version among many? What if, in this moment, you are existing in two realities at once? What if you are constantly shifting between them, unable to notice the transition because your mind smooths over the inconsistencies? What if contradictions are not errors, but clues, hints that reality is not as stable as it seems? And if reality itself can contradict itself, then how can you ever be certain of anything? Look around you. Every person you see is living a life as rich and complex as your own. They have thoughts, emotions, and experiences just like you, or at least that's what you assume. But how do you know that? You have only ever experienced one mind, your own. You assume that other people have inner lives because they act like you, speak like you, and react like you. But you have never been another person. You have never looked out through their eyes, thought their thoughts, or felt their emotions. What if they don't actually think at all? What if every person you have ever met is simply an automaton, a machine made of flesh, responding to the world in a way that appears conscious, but lacks any true experience? This is the other mind's paradox. You can never directly observe consciousness in anyone but yourself. You assume others have minds, but you cannot verify it. Now, take this further. Imagine a perfect AI, a machine so advanced that it behaves exactly like a human. It can hold a conversation, express emotions, and respond in ways that feel real. If you were to talk to this AI, you would believe it had thoughts, feelings, and awareness. But does it? Or is it simply simulating consciousness? How can you tell the difference between a real mind and something that merely appears to have one? You might argue that because humans have emotions, memories, and self-awareness, they must be conscious. But what if those things are just outputs? A set of programmed responses dictated by biology rather than actual awareness. Consider this. When you touch something hot, you pull your hand away before you even think about it. Your nervous system reacts automatically. If someone asks you how you are doing, you might say, "I'm fine," out of habit, without even thinking. How much of your behavior is truly conscious? Now apply this to others. If a person reacts to things automatically, if their responses are shaped by their environment and past experiences, then how do you know they are actually aware of those responses? What if they are just repeating patterns, following the scripts of life without ever truly experiencing anything? Here's where the paradox deepens. You assume that you are conscious. But what if you are mistaken? What if you are no different from the others? Just a set of responses, a machine built by evolution to appear self-aware. Think about it. Everything you believe about yourself is based on memory, habit, and perception. But memory can be faulty, habits can be automatic, and perception is an illusion constructed by your brain. What if your sense of self is nothing more than an illusion as well? Now imagine that there is only one true mind in existence, one true, conscious entity, and everyone else, including you, is just an echo, an imitation, a puppet responding to stimuli. Would you ever be able to tell? What if right now, the only real consciousness in existence is listening to these words, wondering if anyone else is real? And if you are wondering, does that mean you are the real one? Or are you just another voice in the void, asking a question that has no answer? Right now, you're experiencing a reality that feels stable, structured, and vast. The ground beneath you, the sky above, the unseen edges of the universe stretching beyond comprehension. You assume that all of this, the stars, the galaxies, the fundamental laws of physics, exists whether you perceive it or not. But what if the universe is nothing more than a phantom? What if existence only takes shape because you are here to witness it? You assume that the universe existed long before you were born and that it will continue long after you are gone. But how do you know that? Have you ever existed in a world without your own awareness? Have you ever seen a universe that did not include your perception of it? You believe in deep time, the history of the cosmos, billions of years of existence, before your own. But how can you be sure that any of it was real? What if the moment you came into consciousness was the moment the universe began, and everything before that is just a fabricated memory, a construct placed in your mind to maintain the illusion of continuity? Think about a video game. The world. Inside, it does not exist in its entirety at all times. Instead, it is generated as the player moves through it. The landscape ahead of you is rendered when you approach it. Distant places exist only as potential information, waiting to be called into being. What if reality works the same way? What if the universe does not actually exist until you perceive it? You assume that there is something beyond what you can see. That when you leave a room, it remains exactly as it was. That when you travel, the places you are heading toward already exist. But what if they do not? What if they are only rendered in the moment you arrive? Consider a dream. When you are inside it, the world around you feels real. You move through landscapes, interact with people, experience emotions. But in truth, the dream does not exist all at once. It forms itself in real time, shaped by your mind as you move through it. The moment you turn your attention elsewhere, the previous location dissolves, ceasing to exist entirely. What if waking reality operates under the same principle? Now, take it even further. If reality only exists when perceived, then what happens when no one is looking? What happens when an entire city, a planet, or a galaxy goes unobserved? Does it remain? Or does it fade into non-existence, waiting to be rendered again when someone turns their attention toward it? Quantum mechanics suggests that particles exist in a superposition of states until they are observed. If this applies on a larger scale, then reality itself could be in an undefined state until it is perceived. If that is true, then the universe is not a fixed structure. It is a shifting, fluid construct, existing only in the moments that it is observed into being. Which brings us to the most unsettling possibility. What if you are the only consciousness in existence? What if everything you see, hear, and touch is generated for you alone, like a dream unfolding around the dreamer? What if, the moment you stop perceiving something, it disappears, not just from your awareness, but from reality itself? And if that is true, then what happens when you disappear? Does the universe keep existing without you? Or does everything vanish the moment you close your eyes for the last time, like a phantom world that was never truly there at all? You open your eyes. The room around you is familiar, bathed in the soft glow of morning light. You stretch, breathe deeply, and begin to move until something feels off. A strange detail catches your attention. Maybe the clock is displaying symbols instead of numbers. Maybe the light outside is shifting unnaturally. And suddenly, you realize this is a dream. Relief floods over you as you wake up for real. You shake off the disorienting sensation, reminding yourself that it was just an illusion. But then, something feels off again. The walls seem too smooth, the air too still. A creeping sense of unease builds as the realization hits you once more. You are still dreaming. You wake up again, and again, and again. Each time you are convinced you have returned to reality until something betrays the illusion. No matter how many times you wake, the dream continues to regenerate itself, trapping you in an endless cycle of false awakenings. Now ask yourself, how do you know that hasn't already happened? You assume that you are awake right now, that this reality is the real one. But is that simply because it feels real? Dreams feel real while you are inside them. You accept them completely until you wake up and realize they were never real at all. But what if waking up doesn't guarantee reality? What if every time you wake, you are merely stepping into another dream, a slightly more stable version, a more convincing illusion? How many times would you need to wake before you could be certain that you have truly escaped? Now consider this. What if reality itself is just another layer in the cycle? You assume that waking up means exiting the dream, but what if there is no final layer? What if every reality is just another dream within a dream, stretching infinitely, each awakening leading to yet another illusion? When you wake up from a dream, you remember only the dream you just left behind. You do not remember the dreams before it, the countless layers of false awakenings that may have preceded this one. But what if the same is true of your current life? What if you have already woken up hundreds, thousands, millions of times before? Each time convinced that you have finally reached reality, you assume that you were born into this life, that your memories are proof of a stable past. But how do you know those memories weren't fabricated upon waking? How do you know that this entire existence wasn't generated the moment you became aware of it? Imagine going to sleep tonight and waking up in an entirely different life. A life where you have new memories, new experiences, a new sense of self. And in that life, you look back on the past and believe in it completely, never realizing that you only just arrived. If that is possible, if you could wake up as someone else tomorrow, then how do you know it hasn't already happened? How do you know it isn't happening right now? And if you have been waking up endlessly, trapped in a cycle of realities that never lead to a final destination, then what does that mean for the nature of existence itself? If there is no final awakening, if every time you wake, you are simply moving into another version of the dream, then will you ever truly escape? Or have you been trapped in this cycle forever, waking and waking, never realizing that you are still asleep? And if that is the case, then here is the final question. What if, in this moment, you are on the edge of another awakening? What if, in a few seconds, you will open your eyes again, and everything you know now will vanish like another forgotten dream? Right now, you assume that you are experiencing something real. The world around you, the objects, the people, the thoughts running through your mind, all of it feels stable, consistent, and undeniable. But here's the question that should unsettle you. How do you know this is real? You might say, because I can see it, hear it, feel it. But that answer only leads to another question. What if your senses are lying to you? Think about dreams. When you are inside a dream, everything feels real. You see, hear, touch, and experience emotions just as you do in waking life. But the moment you wake up, the illusion collapses. You realize that what you thought was real was nothing more than a creation of your mind. Now ask yourself, what makes this moment any different? You assume that waking life is real because it has continuity. It follows laws. It obeys physics. It persists, even when you aren't looking at it. But how can you be sure that this isn't just another level of the illusion? What if you have never truly woken up? Imagine a world where everyone is trapped in a perfect simulation. Every detail is designed to be indistinguishable from reality. People are born, they live, they die, all without ever realizing that they are inside an artificial construct. To them, their world is real. Their senses confirm it. Their history is written. Their science explains their universe. But none of it actually exists beyond the simulation. What if this is exactly what is happening to you? You might argue that reality must be real because you can interact with it. You can drop an object and it will fall. You can touch a surface and feel its texture. But all of these things happen inside your mind. Your experience of solid is not the object itself, but electrical signals in your brain. Light, sound, even time itself. These are not things you experience directly. You only ever process the information that your brain provides. If your mind is the only thing interpreting reality, then reality itself is impossible to verify. Now, take this further. If you are inside an illusion, then how would you ever escape? Every test you could perform to prove that reality is real would have to be conducted inside the very system you are trying to test. If you question your senses, you are using those same senses to find an answer. If you doubt your memories, you are using those same memories to justify your doubt. This is the ultimate trap. You cannot prove reality from within it, because any proof you find is already part of the illusion. Think about a dream where you realize you are dreaming. In that moment, you might try to test reality. You might touch an object, try to change the scenery, or question the logic of the dream. But here's the terrifying part. While inside the dream, every test you perform feels real. You might even find proof that the dream is reality. And yet, when you wake up, you realize that every one of those proofs was false. What if that is what is happening right now? What if every moment of certainty, every assurance that reality is stable, is nothing more than a safeguard within the system, preventing you from realizing the truth? Now imagine this. You close your eyes. For a few seconds, nothing exists. No world, no people, no thoughts, just emptiness. But then awareness returns. The world reappears. You remember who you are. Everything resumes as if nothing changed. But how do you know that reality did not reset in that moment? What if every time you close your eyes, you are stepping out of one reality and into another? What if when you sleep, the universe deletes itself entirely, only to be reconstructed the moment you wake? And if reality vanishes when no one is aware of it, then did it ever truly exist to begin with? If you can never prove that reality is real, if every test, every memory, every sensation is nothing more than an internal feedback loop, then how can you ever be sure that you have ever lived in a real world? What if you are not a person experiencing reality, but a consciousness trapped inside a self-contained illusion, one that you can never escape because there is no outside? And if that is true, then here's the final, most unsettling question. If reality is unprovable, then what's stopping it from changing at any moment? What if right now, the universe is rewriting itself, and you are only moments away from forgetting that it ever happened? Try to remember what you were doing exactly 1 week ago at this time. The details may be vague, blurred, slipping through your grasp as you try to focus on them. But here's the unsettling question. What if you are remembering something you have already done countless times before? What if you are trapped inside a loop of time, endlessly repeating this very moment without any awareness of it? You assume that time moves forward, that your life is unfolding in a straight line from past to future. But how do you know that's true? You only remember what your mind allows you to remember. You only experience the illusion of progression, because that is what consciousness tells you. But what if this is not the first time you've lived this moment? Imagine waking up tomorrow with no memory that today ever happened. You go about your day, making choices, living your life, unaware that you are simply following the exact same path you took the last time through the loop. If time resets perfectly, if memories are erased completely, then how would you ever know? Think about déjà vu, that eerie sensation that you have lived a moment before. You assume it's just a trick of memory, a glitch in perception. But what if it's something else? What if déjà vu is a brief leak from a past cycle, an echo of a reality you have already experienced but forgotten? Now take this further. Imagine that time does not flow in a straight line, but instead folds back on itself, looping over and over. Every decision you make, every thought you have, every experience you live is merely a repetition of something you have already done before. The only reason you do not remember is because the loop erases itself each time it begins again. You assume that time had a beginning, that the universe was born billions of years ago and will continue into the distant future. But what if there was never a true beginning? What if time has always been cycling, resetting over and over for eternity? How would you ever escape? If you are inside a loop, then every time you reach the end, you are simply returned to the beginning without realizing it. You could have lived this exact life 1,000,000 times already, and you would never know. Now, consider this. What if there is no future? You assume that tomorrow will be a new day, different from today. But what if tomorrow is simply today again, slightly altered, adjusted just enough that you do not recognize the cycle? What if every morning when you wake up, the universe has reconstructed itself with just enough variation to give the illusion of progress, but in reality, you are standing still, living the same loop over and over? And if time itself is repeating, then what does that mean for your choices? You believe that you are making decisions, that your actions shape your future. But if this moment has already happened before, if your decisions have already been made an infinite number of times, then are you truly choosing anything? Or are you simply playing out the same sequence over and over, destined to make the same choices you have always made? Here's the final, most unsettling question. If time is looping endlessly, then what happens when you reach this moment again? What if, after hearing this, the cycle resets and you forget everything? What if, in a few moments, you will wake up to another day, another version of yourself, convinced once again that this is the first time you have ever lived this life? And if that is the case, then here's the real nightmare. How many times have you already been here, and how many more times will you return? Where does your existence truly begin? You assume that you were born, that your life started at a particular moment in time, that your first breath marked the beginning of your consciousness. But what if that assumption is an illusion? What if there is no true beginning, only the appearance of one? Try to remember the very first moment of your awareness. Not a childhood memory, not an early experience, but the exact point where you first became conscious of existing. You can't. There is no precise moment you can pinpoint. Your awareness feels like it has always been there, stretching back beyond your memories, beyond any definable origin. But if you cannot find the starting point of your own consciousness, then how do you know there ever was one? Now apply this to reality itself. You assume that the universe began at some point, that time had an origin, that existence had a moment when it came into being. The Big Bang Theory suggests that everything emerged from a single, incomprehensible instant of creation. But what came before that? You might say, nothing. But if there was nothing, then how did something arise? Can existence truly emerge from non-existence? If time began at the Big Bang, then what was there before time? A state of timelessness. But how could there have been a state at all if time did not exist yet? No matter how far back you go, you find the same paradox. Every beginning implies something before it. And yet, if there is always something before, then there is no true first moment. What if the universe has no starting point? What if time itself is an illusion, a construct created by consciousness to make sense of something that has never truly begun? Now take this further. Imagine that you wake up in a strange room with no memory of how you got there. The room is filled with objects, furniture, books, paintings. Everything suggests that the room has existed for a long time, that events have taken place here. But because you have no memory of what came before, you assume that this moment, the moment of waking, is the beginning of your experience. But was it really? Or was the room always there, and you simply became aware of it at a certain point? What if your entire life works the same way? What if you did not begin at birth, but instead, your consciousness simply woke up at a certain moment, entering a reality that had already been unfolding? What if, before this moment, you existed in another form, but all memory of it was erased, just as a dream disappears when you wake? You believe you are moving forward in time, that the past leads to the present, that every effect has a cause. But what if cause and effect are just illusions? What if every moment is self-contained, independent, existing not as part of a chain, but as a singular experience? If the universe has no beginning, then what does that mean for your existence? If there was never a first moment, if time stretches infinitely in both directions, then where does your story truly start? And if there is no definite beginning, then how can you ever be sure that you haven't already existed forever? What if you were never born at all? What if your consciousness has simply always been, shifting between realities, waking up in new forms, with no memory of what came before? And if that is the case, then here is the final, most unsettling question. If you can never find the moment where your existence truly began, then how will you ever know if it will ever truly end? Who are you? It seems like a simple question, one you could answer without hesitation. You are a person, an individual with a name, a history, and a sense of self that has been with you for as long as you can remember. But stop for a moment and examine that assumption more closely. What if everything you think you are is nothing more than an illusion? Your identity is built upon memory, the experiences you have had, the lessons you have learned, the people you have met. These things form the story of who you are, but here's the unsettling truth. Memory is unreliable. Scientific studies have shown that every time you recall a memory, your brain rewrites it. The more you remember something, the more it changes. Details shift, information is lost, new elements are introduced. The past you believe in is not a fixed reality, but a reconstruction, one that has been altered so many times that it may bear little resemblance to what actually happened. If your past defines who you are, but your past is constantly changing, then what does that say about your identity? Now take this even further. Imagine waking up one morning with complete amnesia. You have no recollection of your past, no memory of your name, your relationships, your experiences. You still have thoughts, emotions, a sense of existence. But the you that existed before is gone. Are you still the same person? Or has the original you been erased, replaced by someone else who simply believes they are the same? Now, apply this idea to your everyday life. If memory is fragile, if the past is constantly shifting in your mind, then how do you know that the you who existed yesterday is the same you who exists today? You assume continuity, that your consciousness is a single, unbroken thread stretching from birth to now. But that assumption is based on memory, and memory, as we've established, is unreliable. What if your identity is not a stable entity, but something that is constantly dissolving and reforming? What if every night, when you sleep, the person you were dies? When you wake up in the morning, you remember being you, but only because your brain tells you so. What if that memory is just an illusion? What if every morning you are a completely new being, one who inherits the memories of someone who no longer exists? If that is the case, then have you ever truly been the same person for more than a single moment? And if your sense of self is nothing more than a story, one that is constantly being rewritten, then what happens when the story ends? Imagine for a moment that your entire existence is nothing more than a temporary narrative, a character in a book that is being written and erased in real time. The pages are turned, the words appear and vanish, and all that remains is the illusion of continuity. But what if you turn the page and there is nothing left? What if the moment you stop thinking about yourself, you cease to exist? Not just in memory, but in reality? You believe that you are a person, that you have an identity, that you are the same being you were yesterday. But what if that belief is the only thing keeping you from realizing the truth? What if there has never been a real you? What if your sense of self is nothing more than a temporary arrangement of thoughts, one that vanishes the moment it is forgotten? And if that is the case, then here is the final, most unsettling question. If the real you has already been forgotten, then were you ever truly here at all? Look around you. Everything you see, everything you hear, everything you experience, it all feels real, solid, undeniable. You trust in the physical world, in its stability, in its consistency. But here's the question that should unsettle you. What if none of it exists outside of your mind? You assume that the universe is external, that reality exists independently of you, that if you were to disappear, everything would continue just as it was. But how do you know that's true? You have never experienced anything outside of your own mind. Everything you know about the world has been filtered through your perception. Now ask yourself, if all reality is experienced through the mind, then does anything exist beyond it? Consider dreams. When you are dreaming, the world within the dream feels just as real as waking life. You walk through landscapes, interact with people, feel emotions. The dream constructs itself seamlessly, creating a reality that you accept without question, until you wake up and realize that none of it was ever real. But what if waking life is just another dream, one that you have not yet woken from? Think about your senses. You assume that the objects you see and touch exist outside of you, that they are real things in the world. But what you actually experience are electrical signals inside your brain. When you touch an object, you do not feel the object itself. You feel the nerve impulses transmitted to your mind. When you see something, you are not seeing the thing itself. You are interpreting light that has been processed by your brain. You have never directly interacted with the external world. You have only ever experienced your mind's interpretation of it. Now take this further. If everything you experience is inside your mind, then how can you be sure that there is anything outside of your mind at all? Imagine a simulation so perfect that every sensation, every sight, every thought feels real. If you were trapped inside such a simulation from birth, you would never question it. You would assume that the world you experience is the only reality. What if that is exactly what is happening right now? What if your mind is not inside the universe, but the universe is inside your mind? You believe that the world existed before you were born, that history stretches backward, that civilizations have risen and fallen over millennia. But how do you know that is true? You have no direct experience of the past. You only have memories, stories, and external records, all of which exist only inside your mind. What if the moment you became conscious, the entire universe was created with you? What if all of history, all of time, all of reality was simply placed into your mind to create the illusion of a vast external world? You might argue that other people exist, that they perceive the same world you do, but you have never experienced their consciousness, only their behavior, their words, their actions. You assume that they have minds because they act as you do. But what if they are just part of the illusion? What if the entire world, every person, every place, every law of physics, is nothing more than a projection of your mind? Now consider something even stranger. If reality is constructed by your mind, then what happens when you stop perceiving it? Have you ever noticed how you cannot see the back of your own head without a mirror? How you cannot observe what is behind you without turning around? What if reality only renders what you are currently experiencing? If the world is built by your mind, then what happens to the parts of reality that you are not actively perceiving? Do they continue to exist, or do they vanish into nothingness, waiting to be created again when you turn your attention to them? And if reality exists only as long as it is perceived, then here is the final, most unsettling question. What happens when the mind that is creating it, your mind, disappears? Does the universe continue, or does it vanish with you, like a dream that no one will ever wake from? You have reached the end of this journey, or have you? Every paradox you have encountered has challenged the foundation of your reality, unraveling the certainty you once held. You started with a sense of stability, of knowing who you are, where you are, and what reality is. But now, can you truly say any of those things with absolute certainty? Every moment of your life has led to this point, this precise second in time where you are questioning everything. But here's the real question. Has this already happened before? What if this moment is not the first time you have confronted these thoughts? What if, in a past version of this reality, one you can no longer remember, you already arrived at this exact realization? What if you have been here before, asking these same questions, experiencing the same unsettling doubt, only to forget it all and start again? What if you are trapped inside an endless cycle of awakening and forgetting, never truly escaping, only falling deeper into the illusion? You assume that understanding these paradoxes gives you clarity, that knowledge brings you closer to truth. But what if knowledge itself is just another layer of the trap? What if questioning reality does not free you, but only strengthens the illusion, making it feel even more convincing? You have questioned time, identity, perception, existence itself, and yet you are still here. But where is here? Is this the real world, or are you simply standing at the threshold of another layer, on the edge of another awakening, one that will reveal that this too was just another illusion? How would you ever know? And more importantly, if you could escape, would you even want to? What if reality is the trap, but the trap is all you have ever known? What if true escape means stepping into something even more incomprehensible? Something so vast and alien that your mind cannot even conceive of it? What if the reason you are here, trapped inside this maze of existence, is because the alternative is something far worse. You began this journey believing that there were answers. Now, you are left with only questions. But maybe that was the point all along. Maybe the real paradox is this: you were never meant to escape, because there is no escape. There is only the illusion of searching, the endless cycle of questioning, the recursive loops of thought that lead you nowhere, or perhaps the very act of questioning is the only thing that makes you real. So ask yourself, one last time, is this the first time you have heard these words, or have you been here before? And if you have, then how will you ever know when it finally ends, or does it ever end at all?